A year ago tomorrow was the night we first told you about a 12-year-old West Yellowstone boy found dead at his grandparents' home.
I sat down with former Gallatin County Sheriff Brian Gutkin, who reflects on that case among many as court proceedings continue.
There's a handful of cases that stick with you, that sort of haunt you. This is one of those that I'll never forget.
A case that former Gallatin County Sheriff Brian Gutkin says has followed him and many others in a scene that brought us back to Buffalo Drive repeatedly over months. 12-year-old James Alexander Hurley found dead in his West Yellowstone home, and Gallatin County attorneys pointing to grandmother Patricia Batts, grandfather James Sasser Jr., and his then 14-year-old uncle James Sasser III for being behind it.
I believe the systematic torture and beatings that were perpetrated on the victim in this case that led to his death.
It shakes an entire community, and obviously the smaller community of the sheriff's office.
Gutkin says he remembers his investigators also feeling that impact.
I think when I sat down with the detective captain, and I could just see it in his face, and then when he told me how much it impacted him and his people, we see the worst of the worst all the time. But when you see and hear that from our folks who have been there and done that, that's when you know it's bad.
Wonderful. Gutkin also remembers the community of West Yellowstone finding each other.
I was just so emotional, and the range of emotions from anger to hurt to guilt. You know, people are wondering if they could have done something different. I remember going to the school and talking to the school superintendent and just listening to them and how it was impacting the teachers and the kids. The ripple effect throughout the entire community was just, it was horrible.
But Gutkin puts focus on scenes like this, when hundreds gathered in West Yellowstone to pay tribute.
No surprises whatsoever, because I've seen it over decades working here and living in this community. It doesn't matter what bad thing happens, whether it's this type of horrible situation or a fire, you name it, just to watch this community come together and work together and help each other out. That's why it's such a special place.
Help from others in a time of sorrow, a thought that Gutkin says he's holding on to as the case continues forward.
We have to keep an eye on our kids. If something doesn't seem right with our kids, never ever hesitate to contact law enforcement. That's what we're there for.
Again, the case is still ongoing. Patricia Batts, charged with deliberate homicide, among other charges, is set for trial in May 2022. James Sasser Jr., also charged with deliberate homicide, is set for a 10-day trial this September. Sasser III was sentenced to the Montana Department of Corrections until he turns 18 and then will be on probation until he is 21. Madison Sasser, Hurley's aunt, was sentenced to youth probation and has agreed to testify against Batts and Sasser Jr., her parents. Now, the last person arrested in connection with an assault on Hurley, Gage Roush, was sentenced in December to probation.